There you go. So welcome everyone to our recruitment roundtable series. I'm really thrilled about our session today, but first let's get just started with some of those rules. I'm going to ask you for today, we have 4 amazing panelists and I'll be introducing them in a second. But want to go ahead and we're going to leave our mics on mute other than our panelists and myself who'll be moderating. Go ahead and leave your comments in the chat box. If we have time to take some chat questions, we'll do so, but we have a lot to cover today. But go ahead and make sure you have your mics on mute through this entire session. So what's this session about? We know that, are you looking to get hired by a tour company and lead some tours? Or maybe you're a tour operator and just want to check out who's on the call, who's looking for work. So if so, chances you've been looking online at various sites like the new tourguidingjobs.com to find your next job. And maybe you've come across a posting and you're thinking, yes, this job looks perfect for me. But what do you do next? Do they want a cover letter and a resume? What should you say? What if you've been a tour director and you've never done local touring? Does that matter? What if you want a driver guide position, but you've only been doing local walking tours? So that's what our panelists are going to go ahead and answer today. So I'd like to welcome Rebecca Hackman, who is the Associate Director for Course Leaders for World Strides, which is a student tour company. Next, I'd like to welcome Dara Mahali, she's the general manager for Experience First California, and they are a walking tour company. I'd like to welcome Cara Riccardi, founder of Stretchy Pants Food Experiences. For those of you looking to maybe do some food tours, she's going to be our expert. And finally, Elizabeth Riccio, who is the tour operations manager for Classic Journeys. So before we get started and launch into not only questions, but I definitely want all of our panelists to introduce themselves. Before we do that, I'm going to turn it over to Yasmin because I want him to take you a little bit through this Tour Guiding Jobs website if you're not familiar with it. So Yasmin, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy, and welcome everyone. I'm just curious, how many of you, if we can see on the screen, have gotten a chance to visit tourguidingjobs.com so far and take a look at some of the job postings? Okay, great. That's exciting. Well, I'm going to give you just a quick 30, 45 second preview of it for those who haven't gotten a chance to see it yet. The website is tourguidingjobs.com, and it's a resource that we created and launched just over a month ago. And basically, it's a resource for you as tour guides, tour directors, other tour professionals to quickly find jobs out there. And it's a free site, so all you got to do is go in and then log in and set up an account. It's super quick and easy, but once you're inside, there's a couple ways for you to locate and find different job opportunities that are out there. So for example, there's a map feature where you can click onto a specific region and various different job postings will come up. And once you do that, you'll be able to click onto that job posting and it'll click on the details and it'll get you to the specific details of that particular opportunity. The other way is you could also go through and do various different searches based on the different types of job postings, driver guide, or let's say you're interested in nature tours. Those get filtered down so that you can quickly find something, or you can specifically type in a city or a state, and it'll list those different job opportunities. Again, it's a great resources. We update this weekly with new job postings all the time. And for those who are tour operators, who have tour businesses, this is also a great resource for you to post your job opportunities as well and get it in front of our community of hundreds of tour guides and tour directors who are looking for opportunities there. So anyway, tourguidingjobs.com, free resource, and we hope that you would use this to help you find your next tour guiding job.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Yasmin. And if Yasmin didn't, I was writing in the background, but if Yasmin didn't mention, those are not just based in the US. We also have positions throughout North America and throughout the world. So we're adding more and more international jobs. So check definitely check those out. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead, and some of you might know our panelists, some of you might actually work for our panelists, but I want to go ahead and give them an opportunity to not only introduce themselves, tell them briefly about their company and what their company does, what's unique, and what they're looking for. So Rebecca, why don't you start us off? Welcome.
Thank you. I am Rebecca Hackman. I'm the Associate Director of Course Leaders and Tour Directors at World Strides, which now also includes Explorica and Bright Spark. We're an accredited travel school, so both students and teachers can earn credit from touring on our programs. I've been with the company for over 20 years, which is astonishing. And I handle all of the scheduling for our East Coast history programs for our guides. So that includes Washington, D.C. and New York, but we cover everything across the country. Over the last 50 years, World Strides has provided travel experiences to students for more than 9 million students actually this year. And that's everything from 8th grade history trips to Washington, D.C. and New York, band and choir competitions across the country, STEM programs, sports tourism, study abroad programs, and even performance-based and theater spectator events in London. So we're really excited to have our students back traveling again. And we are recruiting specifically for our programs in Washington, D.C., New York, and traveling between the two, so both hourly and daily, over the road and city-centered programs, our Florida science programs, other STEM programs in other regions, our national parks tours, which are growing, and we also have a California, Sacramento history-based program for California history 5th graders.
Fantastic, Rebecca. Thanks. That's great. Dara, tell us a little bit about your company and yourself.
Hi, welcome. Thank you for having me, everybody. My name is Dara, and I am the General Manager for Experience First, our California location. We are based in New York, and we're actually expanding to Europe in Rome and Barcelona. We've been in Paris for a little while. I do all of the scheduling and operations, hiring, tour creations for both San Francisco and Los Angeles. But we are hiring for all of our locations. Primarily, we do walking tours. They can range from 2 hours to 6 hours. Sometimes we utilize public transit as a way to give people a very authentic experience into each city. Yes, LA has a subway. But that being said, in Los Angeles, we also have a need for driver guides as well. It's kind of hard to avoid driving in Los Angeles. But otherwise, we do a variety of neighborhood tours. So that can include a specific neighborhood, or it can include something focused on food or art, museums, music. And we really have a need right now for specifically San Francisco, Los Angeles, Dallas, Texas. If anybody is based in Dallas, Texas, I need people there, as well as New York City. We do a variety of tours, really looking for people with performing backgrounds. And I can go into that a little bit later, but thank you again. And yeah, I look forward to speaking more.
Perfect. Thanks so much. What about you? Kara, go ahead and tell us a little about your company.
Sure. Sorry, it's doing a pop. Hi, sorry, sure. My name's Kara Ricciardi. I own Stretchy Pants. It is a local food tour company. We do food experiences. I'm actually a trained chef, and I used to design grocery store products. So then I quit, went to business school, and started Stretchy Pants. We're probably the smallest tour provider on this panel, but we're small but mighty. I'm hiring a lot of contract guides at the moment in San Francisco. Before COVID, I was expanding to New York, but that's been paused until next year, but I definitely am looking for people there as well. My background is a little bit different. After I went to business school, I decided to work for tour companies to understand that. So I worked for some of the big players like Urban Adventures and Context, and then sort of slowly designed and hired my own group. So I'm happy to find people local in the Bay and just learn more about you guys too.
Perfect. That's great. Thanks so much. And last but not least, Elizabeth.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Riccio. I am the tour operations manager at Classic Journeys, and we are a small luxury walking tour company. We've been around for 25 years. In 2014, and I think it was 2019, we were named by Travel and Leisure World's Best Tour Operator. And we handcraft walking journeys, family journeys, multi-sport trips, and special edition trips, which is just like kind of that one time of year, maybe a festival that's going on or something around the world. And so we have public departures. We also handcraft private journeys, and our company, a lot of solo guests will go, again, families, multi-generational, and our group size is maximum 18 people, so small groups, and average is about 10 people on a trip. Right now we are but independent contracting for driver guides in the US, particularly Bryce, Grand Canyon, Zion, Montana, Vermont, and a couple international trips come to mind: Sardinia and Corsica and Tuscany this fall and autumn season. Myself, I've been with Classic Journeys for 7 years now. I've been in the travel industry since 2003, so it's been a while. And family-owned company, great company to work for. We're looking for driver guides that, you know, are that well-connected friend that, you know, guests feel like they're with, that proud cultural host that understands the local life of where they are. Ideally, if you are local to the region, that's awesome, but we're not ruling you out if you've guided all over the US and you live out in the East Coast and we need you for the Southwest. We're not ruling you out at all, but it's awesome if you are local to the region, because our guides, our international guides, are all local to the region. So you're not going to find a US guide from Classic Journeys guiding in Italy. They're all Italian. All of our Iceland guides are Icelandic guides. So that's a little bit about Classic Journeys, and yeah.
Wonderful, Elizabeth, thanks. So first question for the panel, because I know we have some very different companies here. And as I mentioned earlier, sometimes if you've been a tour director, you're not sure if you have the transferable skills to do walking or food tours, or if you've only been concentrating on walking and food tours, for example, and you want to try your hand at one of these other kind of positions, like maybe driver guiding or something, or over the road, and maybe it's students, you've only ever led adults, or vice versa. So for our first question for the panel, what is unique and special, and what are the unique special skills that candidates need to have for your particular position? So what is unique, and what are the special skills that candidates need to have for your particular position? Yeah, go ahead.
I'll start, since I kind of mentioned it in my intro. Because we're a walking tour company, generally focusing on 2-hour, 3-hour experiences when you're in the noisy streets of downtown San Francisco, or on Hollywood Boulevard, or on Wall Street in New York. We find that some of our best guides have a performing background, a theater background. So if you've had any experience at all with theater, including improv classes, that is something we found is really works well for our format, because you're on the streets, you're combating elements with noises, homeless people perhaps are trying to engage with you. I'm sure you've all experienced some of this to some degree or another, but having those improv skills and the ability to kind of ham it up and be animated is really what comes to life for us, where there are other guides that err on the more academic side for educational experiences. And we have a certain need for that to some degree, but mostly really looking for loud, big, bright personalities. And an improv class will serve you well if you haven't taken one, just generally speaking. So that's my comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
I do look for improv, but I look for somebody who can make you their best friend in 5 minutes. That's really the personality I'm going for. A lot of my tours require flexibility, especially in COVID. There's definitely a lot of elements you're working against with timing and making sure. So my goal is to make sure that you have some sort of customer service background so that you understand how to mitigate and set expectations in in the beginning of the tour, because I think that's sort of the most crucial 5 minutes of the tour. And so I look for somebody who sort of has that immediate connection, has that ability to sort of control expectations, and then wouldn't be frazzled if something goes wrong, because inevitably something will always go wrong. I've given enough tours myself to know. So I always tell my guides, if you don't make it anywhere, and they had a great time, that's all that really matters. You know what I mean? And so just making sure they understand that. And then on the flip side, also, because I have such a big food background, I really look for a tour guide who can either has a food background or has a tour background. It doesn't necessarily matter which one. I don't necessarily want to teach you both. I can teach you one or the other, but you have to have an interest in food, because I think that's what really sets us apart in the long run. You have to love food. You can't just be serving them food and not really wanting to tell them your favorites and not really wanting to tell them what's in it, and just trying to bombard with facts, because people on food tours are not there necessarily only for facts. They have a love. So.
Perfect, Kara, thanks. That's great. Yes, absolutely, Rebecca, go ahead.
We look for someone who has the ability to relate to and connect with students. That's our chief goal when recruiting someone. You also have to be physically able to do the job, which is walking sometimes 8 to 10 miles a day, every day on concrete. So it's a big piece. You have to be realistic about it. But one piece of advice I can share is don't be afraid to be different. We get so many resumes that are all the same. 5 years guiding experience, this certification, that certification, this, when oftentimes, none of our itineraries are stock. Everything is custom, even as big as we are. So we're looking for someone who was, the Sunday school teacher for our Christian Discoveries programs, or we're looking for someone who studied, African American heritage, someone who's a Civil War buff, someone who did something different. Everything that you have skill set in, that you have interests in, let us know. Put it on your resume or talk about it in your interview. Sometimes it can be the piece that gets you hired.
Perfect. Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
We at Classic Journeys love storytellers. We love when our guides will tell stories when they're at dinner with our guests. Also, detailed oriented, because as a driver, guide, tour leader, manager, you're playing that guide and tour manager role. And so managing, the budget and little details like, internally you're going about this operational itinerary. And so there's a lot of details that you need to absorb. Customer service, like some of you have all said, a multitasker, I suppose, because if you're driver guiding, you might be talking at the same time. Because we have family journeys, good with kids. You don't have to necessarily have kids, but if you do, that's great, because you're probably, you know how to handle kids, small kids. And then I think someone also mentioned walking, like our trips are walking tours. We don't advertise our trips as hiking trips, because our demographic for our walking tours are, I would say 59, 60, give or take. And so There are some of the older folks on our tours, and so we're not going to go on, crazy hikes. There are some regions around the world where there are more strenuous hikes. But anyways, you got to know how to walk, be physically able. So storytelling is a good one, though.
I love that. Thanks, Elizabeth. So for the panelists, what are the top mistakes that you see people make most often when sending in their resume? What's the thing that makes you go on the no pile versus the yes pile? Rebecca, start us off.
Listing every site ever visited, even once, or passing by an airplane. The biggest one is probably poor grammar and spelling mistakes. It will go to the trash bin every single time. And last is probably addressing the cover letter or the email or whatever it is to the wrong company or person. Do the homework, send it to the right person, double check before you hit send. That's it.
Great, absolutely. Dara, go ahead.
I'm going to just echo on that. For me, it's formatting because everybody has different computers or phones or whatever that they're reading them from. Biggest tip I can give for any industry is PDF your resume. Obviously, make it concise and don't list everything, as Rebecca mentioned, but formatting for me is a huge thing. If it's really difficult to read your resume, I'm not going to spend the time when I have a stack of 50 to look at. But PDFing is really a way to preserve your formatting, no matter what version of Word you're using or any of that. So that's my 2 cents.
Excellent advice. Yeah, Elizabeth, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was so sorry to jump in. I agree with all points with the grammar, and for me, if it's too long, it's kind of like, oh, okay, maybe I'll come back to that later. That's me. Too long or too short, like not enough information, maybe. Yeah, I mean, make it look pretty, make it look good. Like, if you don't know how to do a resume, do some research on how to do it and make it look good. And yeah, I mean, keywords that stand out. And I think, like Rebecca was saying, not just where you've been, but where have you guided, and what are those? For me, also for Classic Journeys, if you have guided for one of our competitors like A&K, Talc, put that on there and make it like woo, because for us, if you've guided for another company similar to Classic Journeys, you sort of get us, you sort of get what kind of clientele we have, that higher end clientele.
And to piggyback on Elizabeth, don't fib about companies you've worked for, because we all talk.
Yes.
All of
Yes,
us.
yes.
So tell the truth.
For mine, I actually ask for them to not give me a cover letter and more of a casual statement, because my tours are so casual. And I can learn a lot about you if you don't give me the casual statement because you didn't read the job description. And also from that casual statement, I'm trying to gauge whether they can be professional but friendly. And so you can get a lot from those. I say like 3 to 4 sentences. And sometimes people will give me like 3 paragraphs kind of saying what Elizabeth said. And I'm just like, you didn't read it. I told you to give me 3 sentences, like telling me about you. And so I think that for me, it's just like, read the full job description. It's so simple, but you'd be surprised how many people do not read the job description.
Excellent. So that kind of leads into our next question, which is a bit of a 2-parter. So first, how do you think candidates should best prepare for their interview with you? So they made it past the resume. They did a great job on the resume. They're preparing for the interview. So how should they prepare? What are you looking for them to have done? And then during the interview, what do they need to do to demonstrate that they've done your homework? So what are you looking for, the research that you want them to have? And then how do they demonstrate that in an interview the best way?
I can hop in, brief, but the best way that we have people prepare is certainly to look at our website. So depending on the destination, if you're looking for a San Francisco job, take a look at the different tours that we offer. It's above and beyond to look at the other offerings we have in different destinations, but that certainly is a great way to demonstrate that you've done your homework. You don't need to know or recite the founding of the company and the names of the people in it, but just a general sense of, oh, you give walking tours. I like this neighborhood. Just making some relevant connection to my specific job posting versus tour guiding, generally speaking. And yeah, there's definitely a point in my interviews where I ask what your favorite neighborhood is, what do you recommend to your friends and family, and what off of the tours that we offer do you know about that neighborhood in general. So that's how I get a feel for if people have looked at our website, because I think that's a good thing to do to prepare.
Tell you a red flag in an interview, because I think so, because I'm offering the gig position, I think a lot of people come in thinking it's easy. And I always kind of warn them that it's a very steep learning curve. I would say between like day one interview to like actually trained, I might hire 5 and get 2. So I think when they come in and they're like, yeah, no problem, I'm kind of like, okay, like, I don't know about you, because if you've been a tour guide, you know that it isn't really, even though you've maybe been in a neighborhood before, it's not always that easy to just come in and do it. So I think that's really, I'm looking for that balance of like feeling confident and capable, but also understanding that it's not that period, that beginning isn't going to be simple.
Yeah, researching the company is always important, and researching the job that you're applying for. If you've applied to be a course leader, a tour guide in Washington, D.C. or New York, do the research and know that requires a license in each of those cities. And if you don't have it, then you either need to tell me that you're working on it, and you are working on it, or don't apply for it. Either have it or be working on it, be in process.
Know who you're interviewing with. Take a look at our website, and also if you are interviewing for a particular tour region to drive or guide for, maybe talk a little bit about that region. I think that's helpful, and not also mention only, oh, I could also guide here. Talk first about what you're kind of applying for, what you're knowing so we know that you're knowledgeable in the region.
Excellent, thank you. So next question, what are some misconceptions that you find candidates have about your particular job description, company, or opportunity? So what are the top misconceptions that candidates have?
I can talk to that because it kind of piggybacks off my last topic. I think with food tours, there's a lot of coordination with the vendors, and with it's an extra element of giving a tour. So you have your sort of walking tour where you're outside and you don't really interact with a lot of the local people. And then the food tour really puts you inside. So I think sometimes there's a misconception about that piece of it and how you handle it and manage it. And so, like I said, for me, it's like you either understand that piece or you don't. And so I think I get a lot of people that are like, oh yeah, I can do, a standard walking tour. And I'm like, okay, there's more. It's not rocket science. You can do it. It's just more that you got to know that there's a lot of pieces, and it is hard to manage people and manage your vendors in the same 3 hours. So I think that's just something I hear and feel a lot. And I kind of gauge it by the person, it's really dependent on who I'm talking to, but I've lost a lot of people in the days, in my training every kind of March, April, May from those things.
think a big misconception for tour guiding in general and candidates that I've seen is trying to express all of the information that you've ever learned about a certain topic. It's really important that you're concise and that you're telling one story with one theme. Keep it kind of like short and sweet is kind of our theme. But again, we're not doing educational tours. We're doing more overall. Like you mentioned, Kara, you are interacting with the vendors. So I don't have that element as much. But when I'm interviewing, I could have a guide who is really well studied, a historian. And to be quite frank, it doesn't matter if you know everything about everything. If you're an encyclopedia, that is great and will serve you in certain places. But really the ability to keep a story short and sweet, concise, get to the point. I am always looking for that because you really don't want to lose people with the like wah 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 wah. I mean, that's a poor representation, but I think most of you know what I'm trying to say. So yeah.
I totally agree with that. I have that a lot. Everybody tries to sort of, not in a bad, like they're trying to tell you everything. They're enthusiastic. They love the place they live, and I'm always like, these people are going to walk away with 3 to 5 facts, and they want to take them home, and they want to be able to tell you about it. So you need to know the facts if they really want to dive deep, but think about you on a tour, how deep you want to go. And I think that, yeah, I get that a lot too. So, and it's a trainable skill. It takes a while.
Elizabeth or Rebecca, any misconceptions? Yeah, Elizabeth, go ahead.
Yeah, I think Dara nailed it. That's exactly what I was thinking too. You don't necessarily need to know dates like in history for when something happened. If you do and you know it, sure, throw it out there, but it's more about like, okay, well, what am I looking at and how am I going to remember this? Like I've gone on a couple classic journeys tours before too, and our guides are just a wealth of information, but I'm not going to remember, you know, the dates in history and what they're telling me about what I'm looking at. But I'll remember the story behind it, maybe, if you kind of make it come to life, where we are or what we're looking at, or, you know, something behind it, like a meaning. I'm trying to think of something else, but yeah.
Guiding is hard work. It's, you know, your knowledge base and your certifications and all of your training, that's just your baseline. It all comes down to logistics and physically pulling off the job and problem solving all the time. Personality management is one of our biggest things. We often say in interviews, you know, here's a situation. You have 2 groups in combination. They're from very different parts of the country. They have very different views on all things, and they're lumped together on a coach, and they're touring together for 5 days. You know, how do you handle this? What do you do? Because it is a matter of, you know, you have adults who want to travel and do their vacation, and they happen to drag their kids along with them, even though it's a student tour. And then you have the others that are, you know, deeply intellectual, and they want the full spiel at every site, and they want everything in between. So personality management is really key to our tours.
Yep.
Excellent. Next question. What are the top mistakes? We were talking a little bit about top mistakes on resumes earlier. What about they finally get that interview? They've impressed you enough. What are the top mistakes that you see people making most often when interviewing with you?
Just generally being underwhelming, honestly. I am looking for bigger personalities. That's what this company is looking for. That might not be the same for everybody, but I'm looking for eye contact, articulation. Can I hear you? Are you human? Can you have this ability to, you know, have small talk? Because you're not just going to be narrating and giving tour content the entire time. Like, just be able to talk freely. But really, that's the biggest mistake I see is people being very timid, not making eye contact. It's kind of true for all jobs, but particularly tour guiding. I mean, you're performing, you're on the streets talking, you know, combating the elements, and I want to know that you can do that from the jump. So that's important for me.
I agree with Dara. If you're boring us in an interview, I can't imagine what you're going to do with a coach full of students and parents. Not knowing the job, not knowing the company that you're applying with, and for us, disparaging student group travel is really a big no-no. But you'd be surprised when people come into it and they're like, oh God, I see all those students in DC and they're just loud and they're all over the place. And I'm like, hello, it's what we do. So yeah, don't do that.
Kind of to piggyback that, I get people who are just not interested in food at all. So, it's not always. I kind of get a mix, but sometimes I'm like, okay, you gotta everyone loves to eat, but you gotta be sort of interested in how that food was made, especially because I come from a food background. So like my tours are all built out of sort of some food science and, how how you get a turnip cake. It's, things like that are so simple, but I feel like sometimes people either get somebody who's really focused on food and doesn't know anything about San Francisco, or people who are really focused on San Francisco and knows nothing about food. So like I said, I could train you on either, but it's definitely, you have to have an interest in the other one. So I think just at least feigning interest, because the guests need to be they're interested. So
for me, the question was, what are the mistakes? Is
right.
that what it was, Amy?
We finally get the interview with you, Elizabeth. What are the mistakes that kind of get them unhired during that interview?
I'm looking for someone to tell me what they're the strongest at. What destinations are they the strongest at? Like if we're talking about a certain tour that I'm trying to, hire for. Yeah, I don't know.
You can circle back to it.
I just thought of another one, actually, if you want me to.
Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
go ahead.
Let me think.
So for me, the process is they interview, they come on a tour, they do a mock tour for me or one of my guides. They give a tour that me or one of my guides are on, and then they're a tour guide. So that's the entire process. And in that process, you can learn a lot about their personality. And I think where sometimes I've had trouble is when they're on as a guest, they can do whatever they want. I want them to be a guest. I want them to remember it so they can then speak about it and understand what the guest experiences is. But that second tour where they're sort of shadowing, if they're interjecting facts or they're a little bit too loud, those are sometimes red flags for me. And, I'll give them one chance and say like, hey, next time, like, don't do this. So making sure that they can follow as well as lead is sort of what I'm looking for in that period of time. And so I think that's a place where I might say like, oh, hey, actually, I don't know if this is a good fit. So I think it's important to understand that the interview does not end after you start training. It sort of goes until your first solo tour.
Also, like, I just thought of another one. If you're too short on your answers, if it's just kind of, if I ask, tell me about, and it's just very brief and it's not, and I'm trying to pull more, but it's just kind of too short. So I can't learn that way. So I guess expand on the answer.
Fantastic. So the next question, this is coming from the chat. They're wanting to know. So I think those tour directors and guides that have experience, don't worry about this. Is a question for the newbies. For those that are recently certified, or this might be their first or possibly their second tour position, are you willing to hire those without experience?
I actually sometimes like people without experience. They're not overly filled with facts, and they are more flexible in learning how to run that tour. Not to say that there's space for both of them, but I definitely feel like you can win me over without having any experience, because it takes a little more work on my end, but you've got more chutzpah, I guess, in my mind.
Yeah, I agree with Kara. They're generally coachable, very open. I think if you're local to that region, it's definite brownie points with Classic Journeys. Even if you haven't guided, you live there, you know it, you're immersed in it. So no, you're not, I wouldn't say no right away. I'd give you a chance.
Definitely. We definitely hire people who have limited or no guiding experience. But I think if you have the right mix of personality and drive to do better and to learn and to go out there and sort of, hop on the other tours and see what other people are doing and make up your own commentary, I think, plus, people who are new to the industry tend to have open availability, which we love, and we can give them more work. So absolutely.
And just another thing to add to, when Classic Journeys, when our groups get to a certain amount of people for US trips, right now during, COVID times, when we're at 10 people, 10 guests, we'll hire on another guide. So we'll have 2 driver guides. And so hiring on a brand new guide that has never guided before with a senior guide that has, absolutely. Yeah.
My comment, which I'm going to come back to, is a performing background, and that can be a variety of things. So when I'm looking at resumes, I love people that specialize in tourism, because it's kind of a unique thing to find, I feel, when you're doing gig-based type of jobs like these tours. But I have so much success with people who have background in like bartending or waiting, people that do in-person customer service. I think that's extremely valuable and a transferable skill. So if you don't have much tour guiding experience, but you've been in a band, or you did theater, even in high school, or you were a bartender at a busy venue, these are all skills, I think, that transfer to tour guiding very well. So highlight that, talk about that, because it's certainly something for me that gives you an extra leg up oftentimes.
That's perfect segue into my next question. When you receive that resume, is there something that stands out for you? Is it a transferable skill? Is it, we just kind of talked about this, is it a previous position? Is there something that you're looking for on those resumes?
Unique experiences
for
us can be, something that jumps out at us, that'll make us, take another look, or would dovetail, would fit with another program we're trying to staff. And to be honest, a good photo, an actual clear, good photo that doesn't scare us, or that we can actually see you and it's not too grainy, it's key.
I do have a bonus for hospitality background. Like Dara said, it doesn't have to be necessarily that you've been a chef. I also hire chefs. That's a whole different hiring process. But I would say if you have that customer service base, you can get away with not having that tour guide, official background. But I would say people do forget to highlight it. That is a thing that I see, they will mention it later because they're like, oh, I was the server, it doesn't matter. I'm like, actually, that means you're flexible. So maybe it's my food background has this a special place in my heart for the people who've worked in restaurants, but you can win my heart over that way.
Elizabeth, do you have something that you're kind of looking for in a resume, something that stands out, or a previous position or a transferable skill?
Transferable skills, like different jobs.
Or it could be a category, as people were mentioning, maybe it's a hospitality, tourism or hospitality background, or maybe customer service. Is there something?
Yeah, sure. Event planning, customer service, that's big. I want to say like therapist, because if you're in a public tour, there's so many different personalities, and sometimes you're using like psychology and just, it's yeah. I feel like our guides feel that way sometimes. They're like, I'm a friend, I'm a therapist. Yeah, and let's see. Yeah, that's all I wanted to add.
I actually thought of another thing too while I was listening to you. For me, you have to have some sort of love of travel. I have traveled a lot, and that's how I sort of fell into the industry. I've been around the world, and so there's a certain subsect of people who just like love traveling, and if you have that love of meeting strangers, then I can kind of, I also look for that, like you have to, be willing to spend your money on a tour rather than a TV, like that's just that's the personality type that I would hope for. So people, sometimes people will highlight like where they've been, and I'm happy. I like that. I'd rather you tell me about like a trip and like why you went on a food tour and you're like, yes, this spoke to me, and then I wanted to be a tour guide. Because one of my best guides was actually on my tour and emailed me and said he wanted to be a tour guide, and he's like my most loyal guide. So it's about loving that experience and like why you want to do it for me.
And I'll jump back in too. For us, current and former teachers, educators are a huge plus for us. They have the experience managing parents as well as students. They understand curriculum, which because we're accredited, we do have a curriculum that we follow. So it's a huge plus to have a current or former teacher on staff.
Fantastic. So a great question from the chat. Are any of you looking for any foreign language skills? Is that something that's a plus? Is it a minimum? Yeah, just let us know briefly and perhaps maybe what some of those languages are.
I would say for us, predominantly Spanish and French. We would like to get to a point where we could offer Spanish public tours. Right now, we don't have enough people requesting Spanish language tours in San Francisco, but in New York City, if you are, the New York City is our biggest volume. So if any of you are moving to New York and you're interested in tour guiding and you speak Spanish, French, also German seems to be a big one to the US. And I think it's definitely an asset, at least for a private tour as well. If I have a specific request, I'm certainly going to book the guide that can speak their language if we have it.
I'm looking for Korean. Koreans love food tours. They love them. And I have no Korean guide. So if you speak Korean, send me an email.
Yeah, we definitely need Spanish the most, but some French as well, occasionally German, but mostly Spanish. Yeah. And that's across all regions.
You don't need to know any foreign language for our US tours here, but it does bring up some ideas. But, hey, maybe we create something like that.
Another question from the chat, this one's specifically for Rebecca. If their knowledge of the things that students study is rather dusty, is this a block to getting hired? So do they have to know, for example, 5th or 7th or 8th grade curriculum? Is that something that you're worried about?
No, because that varies by state. So every state has their own curriculum. There's no national set curriculum, as we all know. So no, it doesn't matter. But you do have to be willing to learn. And it's not like you need to study up for every group that you have because they all come from different states. It's not necessary, but a willingness to know the sites and know your audience. Know that you're dealing with a 5th grade group or an 8th grade group, or these are seniors in high school. That's a very different approach to American history. So flexibility. Knowing the subject.
Fantastic. So last question for our group, because we're just a couple of minutes before the end of our session. So what are some professional and respectful practices when a candidate is following up after sending in either a resume or they've done an interview with you, as not to pester? What's the professional kind of balance there, professional persistence? how would you prefer them to do that? Either, again, after a resume and or after an interview? Yeah, Rebecca, takes away.
I'll go first. I would say in the interview, just saying, I'd love to follow up. When is convenient for you? When should I be calling you? Should I email? Just ask. We would love for you to say, I'd like to touch base, or what's your hiring time frame? When do you expect to make a decision? It's perfectly acceptable to ask that. And that way you're not peppering us with emails and calls every day for 2 weeks. Because sometimes we might be interviewing, but the season doesn't start for 6 months. It just depends. And we'll be very upfront in the interview process about, what time period we're hiring for. But follow-up is great, but maybe ask about when that might be appropriate with each interviewer.
I have a pet peeve, and it's probably just me, but I get annoyed when people send me a thank you email immediately after. And I don't know why that annoys me. I think it becomes sort of insincere. I want to know that you've thought about the job. I'm not saying take 3 days, 24 hours, I think is great. I always appreciate a thank you email for your time. It doesn't have to be long, but if it's personalized, that's going to show me that you've paid attention. But just sending me some generic thank you right after our email is a big eye roll for me, just generally speaking. So.
Cara, Elizabeth, how you want them to follow up with you after?
Yeah. I do like the follow-up email. For me, sort of unlike some of you, I mean, my job at Classic Journeys is not just hiring guides. I'm very busy right now. We are understaffed. I'm managing multiple regions, developing new trips. And so I actually don't mind when people keep pinging me by email or even phone, because I'm very busy that I may forget about, to get back to you. I do like the follow-up email though, just because then I will make sure to get back to you. I'm okay with people pinging me on it. Then it shows me you really want the job or the position, and maybe after the call to say you want it, if you really want it, if you like what you heard.
I would say I'm probably the worst person to ask this, because I'm ultra casual with all of my guides, just because we're so small and I like them all. So for me, I'm happy to have you write me a thank you email, but I end up going to text and just being like, hey, we're going to do this, because there's so much scheduling and it's me. So as long as, to me, if they keep in touch and say I forgot to send them something, they notice that I forgot to send them something and they don't wait. I need somebody who's willing to sort of advocate for themselves if I've forgotten something, because there are times where, if I'm training 5 people, I got to train them on all these different things and they're at different times. So I think for me, it's I'd rather, yes, you'd ping me and I need you to be on top of it, because you might get lost in the shuffle. And yeah, so, but I know I'm a little bit more sort of one-on-one with all of my people. It's a different step, because I'm so local. So
Excellent. So I said that was last, but one last question, because we have a good one in the chat. And just a quick yay or nay, a brief video on their resume. So a little intro video, a little sample of maybe their commentary or a story telling, maybe a 30 to 60 seconds. A yay or nay, you like to see that on a resume, or doesn't really matter to you?
That would be awesome.
30 seconds, yes. 2 minutes, maybe not, but brief. I think that's cool. Yeah.
I think 1 minute is fine.
I feel like it's a good addition, but not necessarily required. I'm a totally different person on video than I am in real life. So I feel like if you're good on video, great, but I'm not going to knock points.
Yeah, I think if you know you're good, then do it.
Yeah, if you're not,
because then it's only a bonus. But if you're not good, it's okay.
Yeah, play to your strengths. But yeah, videos are good and short.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for coming. I just want to say just a very humble and sincere thank you to this amazing panel for letting us kind of get into their brains, see what they're looking for. Remember, definitely be checking out that tourguidingjobs.com. You can see some of them have either just recently posted or are going to post again a position. So a special thank you to Elizabeth and to Cara, to Rebecca, and Dara for being with us today. So thank you, everyone. Super appreciate that. We'll see you back in 2 weeks. We'll be back on Wednesday, June 30th. We don't have a session next week. And thank you again for our panelists. We super appreciate it. And we'll see you back in 2 weeks. Thank